the crowd. Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. We are one blot ahead, Daf Tes Zion, and it's a long Agadata Gemara, very thick blot. We're going to finish all the way at the bottom of Tes Zion at Beis tomorrow morning. Friday morning at 7:10, we'll be learning Daf Yud Zion. No Daf on Shabbos. Back together in person on Sunday night. We're starting 8 lines or so from the bottom of Tes Vav and Beis. We've been in the midst of a sugya where we are learning about the halachos of an avel, and then always asking us follow-up questions. What about a menuda, someone who's been put into excommunication, and what about a mitzora? So let's get started with the final piece of that story. The Gemara says about 7-8 lines from the bottom, avel, eino mishaleach korbanos. An avel is not allowed to send his korbanos through a messenger. The Tanya, Reb Shimon Omer Shlamim. When we talk about Shalom, it's Bizman Shehu Shalem. It's only at a time when he is Shalem, below Bizman Shehu Onein, and not at a time when he has a lost relative. It's very interesting the Gemara chooses the word Onein here, because we were asking about Avelus in general, and the Gemara answers with a very specific answer. But the Meforshim understand this Gemara that the word Onein is not meant to be just the narrower version of an Onein, but really to speak globally about even Avelus. Just interesting pick up on the word Shalem. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi here explains the word Shalem. Where is this Rashi? I didn't mark it off.
8 lines, first word on the line.
8 lines from the top? From the bottom?
So I think that's...
Oh, I see it. Yeah, there you go. Lefichach nikroim shlamim bizman hazeh shalem b'daito shedaito miyusheves alav. The person is not miyushev b'das.
The exact opposite of an own. An avel has problems, but an owning is not daito miyusheves alav.
Yeah,
he is
but this
in the mitzvah.
Yeah, but this applies.
Shalom is owning.
It's true, but the halacha applies also to an onen, that you can't be mishalech korbanos. Oh yeah.
I think it's the opposite.
Oh, okay. I hear you. I hear you. I hear why you're saying that. I hear that. Okay, that's the din. The Gemara says that that's true by an avel. What about a menuda? Ma'ushi ishlach korbanosov. Amar Rav Yosef Tashma. Kolosan shanim shehayu Yisrael b'midbar menudin hayu. With the Jews, when they were in the midbar, they were considered to have been excommunicated. Nevertheless, v'shalchu korbanos, and they still were able to send their korbanos through messengers. Amar le Abaye. Abaye is the one who's been flip-flopping on this many times. The dilma menuda l'shamayim shani dekil. Maybe we should say that no, the Jews who, when they're being menuda min hashamayim, so that's different because that's more lenient, and maybe that's why they were allowed to bring their korbanos, but really maybe a regular scenario would not. But the Gemara, before even answering Abaye, asks a question on Abaye. How could you say kil? Yesterday's blot, you said both chamir and kil. You said that gzeir min hashamayim is good or bad. We don't even know which one. So like we saw yesterday, we'll see again 3 lines from the bottom. Really, Abaye was unsure if a gzeir min hashamayim was considered worse than one from Bezdin, and therefore he used to use the argument as a question and say, I don't agree with you, possibly. I'm not sure. How do we know? He was basically saying, every time you talk about a gzeir min hashamayim, I don't know if that's a chumrah or a kula. So every time you ask about it, I'm gonna say this comment because I don't understand what the level of severity is for nidui min hashamayim. 3 lines from the bottom. Mitzora ma'ushi ishlach korbanos. What about a mitzora? Tashma the brayser. It's the Tanya. We really need the end of this brayser, but we'll read the beginning as well. So this is speaking about a Kohen after he had become in touch with a mace, which he's not allowed to do. Fine. Again, we're not discussing that sugya. Shivas yamim yisaprulo. He should count 7 days. Speaking about a mitzora, eluzayin yimei sfira, that he has to count 7 days, as we've seen earlier in the Masechta. And then the pasuk writes, uvayom bo el hakodesh al chatzar apnimus v'sharas b'kodesh yakriv chata. So what is that talking about? Unrelated to our sugya as well. Top of Tezayin and Alav zoasir seifa shelo. That is the first korban, the inaugural korban that a kohen would make. That's what Rashi says at the top. Shemevi kohen hedjot kishem ischan chanoso la'avodat tchila. It's the first korban that he'll bring to be Rabbi Yehuda. Now let's get to the part of the brayso that we need. Reb Shimon Omer bevo yakriv. Bizman sheroi lebia. When a kohen is allowed to do the avodah, he's allowed to be ba into the Beis Hamikdash. Then roi la'akrava. Bizman she'enu roi lebia. Einu roi la'akrava. It just depends on his status. So you were asking about a question of a mitzora, and well, if that mitzora is a kohen, then that really depends. Can the Kohen send a messenger? Only if he's Roi Labia, only if he's able to actually enter the Mikdash himself. For the next blot, basically, almost until the end of the page, the Gemara is going to discuss some of the halachos about Shamta. Shamta is an overarching category which we refer to as excommunication, and there are multiple levels. The basic level The simpler level, as we're going to learn about, is a cherem, and the higher level is referred to as muchram, where you're totally excommunicated, much of a sharper level. We're going to learn about both of those and some very basic questions about how a bezin actually works. This Gemara is very, very important for dayanim to learn, as are all Gemaras, but this one is about how a bezdin functions. 4 lines down, Tez Zayin Amud Aleph. How do we know that the bezdin, the dayanim themselves, don't go out? They send a shaliach. Says the Gemara, it says that Moshe sent people to go find Dasan and Aviram b'nei Eliyav. So therefore, we know that you're allowed to send a shaliach. How do we know that the dayanim are allowed to summon someone to Bezdin? Says the Gemara, you two, you guys are with me. We got to talk now. Something's wrong here. And Lakame Gavar Rabbah, when they go over to them, we have to say to the person you are to meet before the great Rav, the great whoever, the Dayanim. Says the Gemara, how do we know that that's supposed to be included in the introductory comments? It's like when you're issuing a warrant, but if you're issuing a warrant, you'd say, on behalf of the appellate court of X, on behalf of the Chashav Bezdin of the Chicago Rabbinical Council, the Agud, whatever it is. So how do we know that that's true? Lifnei Hashem, because it says it should be done before Hashem with the Chashivus. At v'planya, what does it mean when it says the two of you? Dechsiv ata v'heim ve'aharon. It's including all of the litigants. Dekavin and Zimna. How do we know that we need to clarify a time that they're supposed to meet? Dechsiv machar and Zimna basar Zimna. Let's say they don't listen the first time. How do we know that we can summon them a second time? That's based on the pasuk Dechsiv. Karu Shamparo Melech Mitzrayim She'on He'avir Moed. Sham here is from the word Shamta. Rashi writes, so this paro of the time was given a Shamta. He was put into Nidui because he didn't listen to what he was supposed to do. Uminalan, and how do we know the Imis Paker B'Shlicha de Beidina, that if the Shaliach that was sent on behalf of Bezdin, if he gets berated by one of the litigants, V'asiv Amar, and he comes back and he tells the Bezdin what happens, that this person, this Shaliach who was passing on the messages of what happened, that Lo Mischazek Kalishna Bisha, that he didn't violate any of the halachos of Lashon Hara, says the Gemara, Dechsiv Ha'inei Ha'anashim Ha'im Tenaker, the Psukim in Parshas Shlach. Fine. So we see from there that it's not Lashon Hara when the Shliach Bezdin comes back and reports what happens. And how do we know that a Bezdin has the latitude to put someone into Shamtin and to put them into this lower level of excommunication? Oru Meroz, because the curse of Meroz. Meroz was, we'll see who Meroz was or what Meroz was soon, but the word Oru means that he was cursed, and that means that Bezdin has the ability to put someone into Shamta, into the lower level of excommunication. Dahachi Savra de Gabra Rabba, Dahachi Svara de Gabra Rabba, and we have to say whatever the psak is, that this is the psak din of this Gabra Rabba. How do we know that that's the case? That we have to highlight his status, the status of the Dayanim, Dechsiv Amar Malach Hashem, because it says one of the messengers of Hashem. And how do we know that even the higher level of Charama, of being Muchram, that a Bezdin has the power to do so? Dechsiv Oru Arur, another pasuk that says that they're very cursed and they're very closed off. That's going to be the higher level of Chera. Says the Gemara, how do we know that if a person was the Achil V'Shasi Behade, if you're eating and drinking with this person who's in Cherem, or V'Koi Be'arba Amos Tidei, even being within his presence of Dalet Amos, that's problematic? Says the Gemara, Dechsiv Yoshveha, those who were near Meroz, as we'll soon see a pshat in what's going on with Meroz. Uminalan departinan Chata'eha B'Tzibura. How do we know that if a person's in Cherem, that the Bezdin is allowed to publicize their crimes? Dechsiv Kilo Bo LeEzras Hashem. Marula be'arba mea shipure shamte Barak limaroz. In the times of Barak and Deborah lived at the same time, and Deborah was a shofetes, and they had told Maroz to join them, and it says Ki lo bo le'ezras Hashem. He didn't show up, and what did they do? They responded by having 400 shofar blowers. Ba'arba mea shipure shamte Barak limaroz. That's how he put him into shamta, how he put him into excommunication. Obviously, a very, very public display that he had done something wrong. Who was this Meroz? Some say he was really a very great person, and some say nothing at all. He was a constellation of some kind. He was a star of some kind. Rashi here says that this is the star of Sisera, that Meroz was the star of Sisera, or the constellation of Sisera. These Gemaras are a little hard to know. Like, Like the famed Machlokes Rambam and Ramban, is every pasuk in Chumash meant to be taken literal? Is there an Isser Daraisa of actually putting a stumbling block before a blind person, or is it meant for the homily that you can't lead someone astray by offering them food knowing that they won't make a bracha? All the discussions there. And how do we know that the Meroz is a reference to a kochav? Shenemar min hashamayim nilchamu hakochavim. There was an argument among the stars, and that was a reference to Meroz not listening to Devorah and Barak. The Gemara continues a quarter of the way down, 10 lines or so into the wide lines. We can take over this person's physical property. We can take his property. If he doesn't listen to Bezdin, he's done for. If you don't show up after 3 days of the wise officers and elders calling you, then all of your property can be put up for spoils for people, for the Bezdin to hold on to. And you're going to be separated from the people. And how do we know? And this is a very politically charged comment, that Bezdin has the right to do the following: Denatzinan, that there could be arguing, Valaitinan, to curse people, Umachinan, to hit people, Vitalshinan, Seir, to even pull hair, Umashbiinan, and force people to swear. How do we know? Because the pasuk writes, V'arivimam v'aklala, v'akem mehem anashim v'amaratem v'ashbiim. So akeh is to hit, Kalalam is to curse, Amartem is to pull out hair or feathers, which normally by animals, it's called marita, V'ashbiim, and to make them swear. So we see from that pasuk that they're allowed to do that. Uminalam de kaftinan ve'asrinan ve'abdinan hardafa. How do we know that we're allowed to grab onto them and tie them down and do what's referred to as hardafa? We'll see what hardafa is momentarily. Because the pasuk says, we're allowed to do all of these things to him, even the shrushe, my shrushe. So says the Gemara, Amar Adamari, Amar Rab Nechemya bar Baruch, Amar Rab Chia bar Avin, Amar Rab Yehuda, hardafa. So the pasuk, when it says the shrushe, that you're allowed to do uprooting, that is hardafa. My hardafa, we still don't know what hardafa is. So says the Gemara, this that the Bezdin says you're allowed to do to a person who doesn't listen to the Bezdin. Amar Rab Yehuda bered Rab Shmuel bar Shilas mishmei derav menadin la'altar. It's instantly being put into nidui, being put into excommunication. So that's what the din is that when we say that we're allowed to tie him up, we're not beating the guy up. What we're doing is we're saying, you're going to listen to us or you're going to be put into excommunication. Then the Gemara says, that if a person is excommunicated for 30 days and he doesn't change his ways, he goes into another stage of 30 days. And then if after that he doesn't listen, he enters the higher level of charama, the higher level of excommunication on day 60. I disagree with the breakdown of days of 30, 30, 30. It's really not true. Masrin Bey Sheni. He enters the first level on Sheni, on a Monday. If he doesn't do tshuva by Chamishi, he's put back into Cherem again. And if by the next Monday, V'Sheni, he doesn't do tshuva yet again, he's put into the higher level of Cherem, of Machraminan. And says the Gemara, all of this, Hani, immediately, these levels is only lemahona. That's if he's not keeping a baseline din of halacha when it comes to mamnis. Aval afkirusa lealtar. If a person does afkirusa, if a person is not cautious about how he treats rabbanim, so then under those circumstances, he gets put into shamta immediately. No questions asked. Take a look at Rashi, an inch above where we are, a little bit more than halfway down in the Rashis. La'afkirusa mevaza talmidei chachamim. Anyone who is mevaza talmidei chachamim instantly are going to be put into a case, a scenario of nidui, of some type of excommunication. To be clear, it has to be the case that Bezdin puts someone into nidui. When someone puts themselves into excommunication, it's called nazifa, which we're going to learn about extensively today. And here's a story. Halfway down to Zayin Amidal, there was a particular butcher, the Ispakar Rav Tuvi Bar Masna. He was extremely rude. He called out. He was very rude to Rav Tuvi Bar Masna. And that when this came to Bezdin, Imnu Ale Abai v'Rava v'Shamtu. Abai v'Rava were given the case to deal with v'Shamtu, and they put this person, this tavach, this shochet, or whatever he was, as a butcher, they put him into shamtu, they put him into excommunication. L'sov, he felt bad about what he did. Azal paisei lebaldina. He went over to the Rav that he had maligned, Rav Tuvi Bar Mas. He apologized and he said, like, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean the words that I said. I'm sorry. Amar Abaye heichi le'avid. What should we do? I'm stuck. On the one hand, he did something wrong, and therefore lishri le. Should I undo now that he apologized? Do I just take him out of shamta? I take him out of his excommunication. If I do that, then lo chal shamta le'tlasin yom. Then he hasn't kept his 30 days, which is the standard. And says the Gemara, lo lishri le. If I don't free him up, then we have another problem. Kabo Rabbanan Lamel. They need to utilize him because he's the butcher. He's the only butcher in town. So if you take him out, then he hasn't done the 30 days. If you leave him in, then no one's going to have any meat to eat. What should we do? We're stuck between a rock and a hard place. What?
Vegetarian from
That's not an option. You notice the Gemara did not say that's. You just gave a raya brura that being vegan is not an option, because the Gemara says that's a beautiful argument. It's a clear raya. I'm not such a carnivore, but the Gemara stipulates very clearly in its Havamina that the meat has to be available. Okay. Anyways, that's the quandary. Amar Leila Ravidi Baravin Midi Shmialach Beha. He says to him, "Did you hear an answer to this question? I'm stuck. It hasn't been 30 days, but we need him as a butcher." Amar Lehachi Amar Rav Tachlifa Baravimi Amar Shmuel. Here's the answer that Shmuel gave. Unbelievable how words travel. Tut asar. The sound of the shofar forbade him. The tut shari. The sound of the shofar will release him. And like the word English, like toot, it's the same exact thing. What?
No.
Yeah, it's exactly right. It seems to be the same exact word. Right, exactly.
That's right.
It's spelled differently, but yeah, that's a strawberry. That's a tough. That's a tough. Yeah. Tut sadeh is tough above tough. Yeah. Anyways, this is the sound, and the etymology seemed to carry, the spelling seemed to carry over from one generation to the next. Is it onomatopoeia or is it actually a word? I'm sure it's in the dictionary now, but that doesn't mean anything. I wonder if it's actually a word or if it's just that a word that we use, like onomatopoeia. I don't know. Dad, is toot a word?
It is.
There's a Tosus and Menachos that talks about.
Can you play it in Scrabble?
That's the question to ask Dr. Karesh. Toot?
No, 7 letters. Yeah, toot.
No, toot. Yeah, is that a real word? Anyways,
The example they give of onomatopoeia is the tintinnabulation of bells, and that's supposed to make it sound like.
oh, is that what they're supposed to sound like?
something.
All right.
The more you know.
The more you know. It's Shmuel Mordechai Shmuel are sharing the table today. So it's
I would love to go through your class for a semester. Is that like possible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm doing it on Zoom.
Oh,
Zoom, watch it anywhere.
oh my gosh.
Every 9 o'clock.
I want to watch the two of you on Zoom. That's what I want.
sounds like it's-
Radio Pharmaceutical Chemistry 101. It's going to be great. Amar Le, he says back to him, I understand your answer that a shofar that brings you into your shamta could bring you out, but that's only true. Hani mili le mamona. But in this case, this wasn't the case of Mamonis. He maligned the Rav. So therefore, you don't have the leniency. That it seems to be that we should have to wait a full 30 days. If you're going to be mafkir a Rav, if you're going to say something that's not right about a Rav, you belong b'nidui for 30 days. And there's an implication that's made here from the Gemara, Alma. It seems to be that kasavar abaye that hani betzlasa deshmitu lo asu tlasa achrini b'sharule, that the 3 people that put someone into nidui, no one else can do it. You can't have other. If I'm well, let's say it's let's say the 3 of us. I'm related to you. So let's say Mark and Michael and I put someone into nidui. Only the 3 of us can take him out of nidui, not another 3 people. It has to only be us. And says the Gemara, lo asu tlasa achrini b'sharule. And this was a long-standing question, 2/3 of the way down. If 3 people A, B, and C put someone into nidui, what about people D, E, and F? Can they take that guy out of nidui? This is what we do every year by a Tarsh Nadarim Ladugma, that we didn't make our commitments to the Dayanim that are here, but they can get us out of our mess. Fine. That was what the Gemara's question was. The Gemara says, Tashma, let's see. Menuda le Rav, Menuda le Talmud. If there is a Rav who makes a Talmud into an excommunicated person, then it applies, then the students have to treat him the same way. But the other way is not true. Menuda le Talmud, Eina Menuda le Rav. If the Talmidim pick one of their friends who deserves to be B'Shamta, so that doesn't apply to the Rav. The Rav doesn't have to treat him the same way. Similarly, if I live in my city and someone feels the need to put me into nidui because I'm not listening to Bezdin, that's true in my city, and therefore everywhere I travel, the halacha also applies. However, if I'm out of town, let's say I'm not in Chicago, I'm in Pittsburgh, wherever, and I'm menudal ira cheres, then when I come home, I'm not necessarily benidui. Doesn't work that way. Now, menuda l'nasi, menuda l'kol Yisrael. If the nasi of the Jewish people put someone into shamta, it applies to everyone. But menuda l'kol Yisrael ain't menuda l'nasi. If it wasn't the nasi who put him into shamta, then the nasi has a hand over him. He still doesn't have to treat him that way. And here is the halacha that applies most directly to us. Says the Gemara, Rashbag Omer, Echad mina talmidim shenida umeis. If there was one student who put someone into shamta, put someone into nidui, and he died, so then chelko eino mufar. It seems to be that his one person is eino mufar. His one person is eino mufar. That person is still going to be stuck and trapped in. I don't have to go to the airport.
I know you don't.
You, are you picking up?
Very nice.
Uncle Charles.
Uncle
and
Charles.
45 minutes early.
All right, go say hi.
Crapped up my Gemara sheet,
Should tell him that.
but I do love my brother. So.
Oh, that's so nice.
All right, let's go. Let's not take this out of line anymore. It says the Gemara, Chelko eino mufar. Shma mina tzlas. We learned three things from here, 3/4 of the way down. We learned three things from this Gemara. Shma mina talmid shenida lechvodo niduyo nidui. That if there is a talmid who puts another person into shamta because of his own kavod, that's still considered to be an excommunication. It's valid to some degree. That each person has to play a role in, if I put the person into shamta, I have to be the one to take him out. And the third one is it has to be that I'm one of the three. If I put him in, I'm have to be one of the ones to take him out. However, Amemar doesn't agree with this. He disagrees. He says that if people A, B, and C put a person into shamta, another three people can take him out. Okay, fine. Says the Gemara, Amar the Ravashi le'amemar. How can you say that? V'hatanya Rashbag Omer Echad min hatalmidim shenida umeis chelko eino mufar. My love, eino mufar klal. It seems to be amemar that it has to specifically be that of the three people A, B, and C who put someone into shamta, they put him into excommunication. They have to be involved in undoing that. So how can you say that, Amemar? So he says, "Lo, that's not what the brisa means. It's ad asabet lasacharini b'sharla." You're right that one person can't get him out, but a different set of people D, E, and F, they can get him out, no problem at all. Fine. Says the Gemara starting a new brisa, but on the same topic, Tanu Rabbanon, where 8, 9, 10 lines from the bottom of the page says Zayin and Aleph. Nidui pachos milamid. Nidui should be 30 days. Nizifa pachos mizayin. Nizifa is a self-imposed type of excommunication where you recognize you did something wrong and you put yourself into Nazifa. And that, says the Gemara, should always be 7 days. Even though I can't prove it, there is a pasuk that indicates as much. The pasuk by Miriam, if your father would spit in your face, wouldn't it mean that you would then have to spend at least 7 days by yourselves? So that's an implication of Nazifa, where Miriam should have taken 7 days on her own to go be away from the people. She spoke Lashon Hara. Our nidui is like their nazifa. Unazifa didhu shiva, and that's only 7 days. Says the Gemara Basulo. How can you say that it's not more than 7 days? Here are a whole host of stories where we see that it was actually more than 7 days. It was 30 days. Reb Shimon bar Rebbe, Reb Shimon, the son of Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, Ubar Kapara. They were chavrusas. They were sitting and they were learning. They were learning a sugya that they didn't understand. Hard for us to understand that they didn't understand something, but they didn't. Amar le Rav Shimon, lebar kapara. Rav Shimon, the son of Rebbe, said to Bar Kapara, Davar zeh tzarich Rebbe. This needs a Rebbe. He wasn't directly talking about his father. He was just saying this needs a Rav. We need help. We're stuck on the sugya. Go ask a Shaila. Amar le Bar Kapara, Rav Shimon, Umar Rebbe Omer b'davar zeh. And it doesn't seem clear that that's what Bar Kapara was trying to do to insult Rebbe, but he said, what can Rebbe even help us with over here? So that night, Reb Shimon went home, Azal, Amar Leila Avua. He went home and he told his father what happened. They were learning a tough sugya, and I said this, and he said that, and it seemed to be a direct comment to Rebbe. In Ikbid, Rebbe got upset that Bar Kapara spoke this way to him. So then the next day, or soon after, Asa Bar Kapara li'ischazuye. So then Bar Kapara had gone to go do the mitzvah Bikar Cholim to visit Rebbe. Rebbe had some medical issues he was dealing with. Omar le Bar Kapara, eni makircha me'olam. I don't even know who you are. I don't even recognize you. So he read between the lines. Yada did not keep milsa b'daite. Bar Kapara understood that Rebbe took his comment personally. And Nohag Nizivusa Benafshin Tlas in Yomin. and he treated himself with a self-imposed exile of sorts for 30 days. Shuv Pama Achas, another story. Gazar Rebbe Shelo Yeshanu Talmidim B'Shuk. Rebbe said that you're my students. My students, you're not allowed to teach Torah to others in a public place. My Darash. What was the drasha that Rebbe had said that implied that Torah should not be taught in a public setting, in a shuk? Says the Gemara, because the pasuk says Chamukei Rechayach Kamo Chaloim, that the thighs, a part of the thighs that are invisible, are like jewels. My Yorach B'Seiser, just like the thigh is invisible. Divrei Torah B'Seiser. The same is true that Torah learning should be done B'Seiser. And then, while that's true that was Rebbe's decree, Yata Reb Chia V'Shana L'Shnei B'nei Achav B'Shuk. Rebbe gave a shiur to two people, his nephews, in the marketplace, the Rav Ule Rabba Bar Rav Chana. And then Shama Rebbe heard what happened in Ikbid. He got very upset. I made a gzera for my Talmidim. You can't teach Torah in the shuk. These two guys are sitting down on a bench in the shuk learning a daf Gemara. It's not right. You should not be learning in public. Anyways, the parallel story is that also Reb Chia went to go to Bikur Cholim, and he went to go visit Rebbe. Omar Le, and Rebbe totally railed on him, and he called him Iya. Do you remember we learned many blot ago that Reb Chia had a speech impediment and he was terrible with chesed? We learned about this a while back. So what was Rebbe doing? He was saying a derogatory language, a bad nickname, which we learned about, by the way, no bad nicknames. Says the Gemara, he was referring to him by the name that he would call himself. What's your name? Iya, because he couldn't say the ches. So his name is Chia, but it sounded like Iya is making fun of him. Someone talking to you outside. Oh, you taught shiur outside. I told you not to teach shiur outside. So Yada did not have Milsa B'daite. Rav Chia kind of picked up on the glaring clues that clearly Rebbe was upset. Noag Nezivusa B'Nafshin plus in Yomin. And he also did a self-imposed 30 days because he didn't listen to his Rebbe. Some of the Meforshim here explain that it's true that we don't give negative nicknames to people. However, between a Rebbe and a Talmud, there's a sharpness that is allowed because a Rebbe knows how to move people the right way. And under those circumstances, Rebbe was not out of line. Says the Gemara 6 lines down on Tezayin and Beis. The Yom Tlasin, on the 30th day after Reb Chia put himself in Nizifa, in Nizivusa, in a self-imposed exile, Shalach Leita, he sent to him, come back. And then Hadar, and then Rebbe actually sent another one, Hadar Shalach Le Delolesi. No, don't come back. It's like one text message after another, but it's by letter, so it's obviously a much longer response. So the Gemara interjects, trying to understand what happened in Rebbe's mind. Meikara mysavar ulvasof mysavar. Why did you first tell him that he can come back, and then why did you change your mind to say that he can't? Meikara savar miksasayom kikulo. Initially, when I was doing the math, I felt that it was miksasayom kikulo. I sent my letter at 9 a.m. You're done. So somebody bring him back. And then, but Ulubasov says, Savar lo amrin and Mixasayom Kikulo, that we don't say by Nazifa, we don't say Mixasayom Kikulo. Anyways, Lasof Asa. Reb Chia came back in the middle of that day. Amarle, Amai Asis. Rabbi saw him, he's like, what are you doing here? You're not done with your 30 days yet. It's still the middle of the day, and we don't hold the Mixasayom Kikulo. Amarle, I only saw the first letter, the Shalach li Mar Delesi. He says, I also sent a letter that you shouldn't come back, stay where you are. And then instead of Rebbe getting upset, Rebbe looked at the situation as Ashkacha Pratis, Kari Ale, Birtzos Hashem, Gam that if a Kadosh Baruch Hu wants someone to be in a certain place, even his enemies have to be good with that. It was just tongue in cheek saying that, okay, whether or not I wanted you to be back, it doesn't matter because obviously a Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted you to be back. So my taima avad mar hachi. Let's ask against Reb Chia. Reb Chia, you had a gzera from your Rebbe. What were you doing? Why were you teaching publicly if Rebbe said you're not allowed? Because the wisdom of the outside will be joyous. So said that's a good argument. So why then did he do that? Amar Le, Rebbe says back to Reb Chia, in Karis lo shanis, if you read it once, you certainly didn't read it twice. And if the imshanis, if you read that pasuk of chachmas b'chutz taruna twice, lo shilshis, you didn't read it a third time. The imshilshis, if you read it the third time and you still didn't understand it, lo pirshulach. Nobody ever explained it to you. That's not what the pasuk means. Rebbe explains to his Talmud to Reb Chia, chachmas b'chutz taruna kiderava. We understand that pasuk like Rava. Anyone who learns privately in the insular walls of the Beis HaMedrash, people will know about his learning even outside the basement. You don't have to publicize it. Don't worry about it. That's not what the pasuk means. Hold on 1 second. Not everything should be in private. Says the Gemara. That was when they had a Yom Dekala, which was like it's a Yarchei Kala. In our language, Yom Dekala was a day when everybody got together to learn, and that typically happened around the Chagim. Reb Chia, what do you do with the pasuk that your Rebbe led with? The pasuk that says as a mashal that there's a part of the leg that is invisible, and that should be the comparison to Torah. Mukila b'tzedakah milas chasadim. Now, I wasn't talking about Talmud Torah. It's talking about the mitzvah of tzedakah, which should be done b'seiser, and it should be talking about milas chasadim, which as well should have been done b'seiser. Either way, from all of these stories, this is like a 30-line question. Alma, what do we see? Nazifa didhu tzlas in yomin. We see that Nazifa is 30 days. We started at the bottom of Tez Zayin Amud Beis saying that Nazifa is only 7 days. That's not true. What about all these stories? Says the Gemara, it's different. Nazifas Nasi Shiny. When the Nasi tells you that you're in Nazifa, that's much different. When Nazifa didan, the Nazifa outside of Eretz Yisrael, Kamahave, how much is Nazifa nowadays? Chad Yoma, it's even only 1 day. And let's learn 3 stories about this. The Gemara says, Kihad Shmuel Mar Ukva. Shmuel was the Rebbe of Mar Ukva. Great historical note. It's the only way to understand this page. And it's just good to hold in the memory banks that Shmuel was the Rebbe of Mar Ukva. When they were learning Torah together in the Beis Medrash, Mar Ukva would sit Daled Amos away from Shmuel out of deference, out of respect. However, when they were in Bezdin together, Mar Ukva was the Talmud, but he was the Rosh of Bezdin. Then Mar Ukva would take the chair, and his Rebbe would move away Daled Amos, because in this frame, Mar Ukva was the Rosh of Bezdin. But when Mar Ukva was the Rosh HaBezdin, they carved out a specific place for Mar Ukva to sit in, even when he was the Rosh HaBezdin, so that he could be within earshot of his Rebbe of Shmuel, so that he could hear whatever Shmuel was saying. Very important to hear the Rebbe. Okay, fine. The story continues. Every day, Mar Ukva would walk Shmuel home. He'd walk his Rebbe home until he got to his door. Yom Echad, one day they were walking home, but Itrad Bedine, Mar Ukva was really struggling to understand one of the psukim of that day. And Hava'azil Shmuel Basrei, Shmuel was kind of walking behind him. He was walking around in just trying to figure out I don't understand the sugya, what was the din. So Mar Ukva was distracted. Kimata lebeise, when they finally got to the home of Shmuel, Shmuel piped up, Amarle, lo nagalach, isn't it bright to you? Isn't it clear to you? Says the Gemara. Lishri li mar b'tigri, let me get out of this uncomfortable situation. In other words, Shmuel was not respected by Mar Ukva. Mar Ukva was totally spacing out in learning, but he should have been focused on his Rebbe, and he wasn't. So says the Gemara, at that time, when he heard those words come out of Shmuel's mouth, Mar Ukva knew Yoda to nakam nilsa b'daite, and therefore nag nazivusa b'nafshei chad yoma, and he took 1 day of self-imposed exile to make himself pay a little bit more attention to his Rebbe. The next story, 8 lines down into the wide lines, halfway down on the page, there was a woman, she was sitting at the crossroads, and Havas Pashta Kare, she had her legs fully extended out into the road. And she was cleaning off barley in some type of filter. And there was a certain Rav that walked by, and he expected her to retract her legs, to move her legs out of the way so he could walk down the street. She didn't do so. She left her legs as they were. This woman is so rude. This woman was concerned that maybe she was Bishamta, so Asai Lekame de Rav Nachman. She went to go ask a Shaila. She said, I was sitting there, I didn't realize what was going on, my legs were extended. And this guy, this young Rav in the community wanted to walk by. I didn't realize what was happening. And he said something not nice to me. Amar le, Mishamas Shamta Mipume. Did he say from his mouth that you are Shamta, that you are excommunicated? Amar le lo. She said, no, you are not excommunicated. Amar le. So Rav Nachman said back to this woman, Zili, you should go. Nehuge Nezifusa Chad Yoma Benafshech. You should take 1 day of reprieve from society. Go back, just take a day off and focus.
Don't associate with anyone.
Right. It's kind of a self-imposed. It's not an actual excommunication, but she treated a Rav not nicely, and she took 1 day self-imposed excommunication. Then says the Gemara, Zutra bar Tuvia have a kapasik sidur kamed Rav Yehuda. This is the third story of how we know that in Bavel that Yom Nizivusa was only 1 day. So this person was learning psukim in front of Rav Yehuda. Kimanta v'hai psukim. When he got to the following pasuk, the pasuk reads ve'ela divrei David ha'achronim. These are the final words. The Gemara is understood by the Rishonim to mean that it was the final prophetic words of David. And the Talmud asked the question, it seems to be that if this was the Achronim, that there must also be a first prophecy that David gave. What is it? Rishonim, my nihu. However, Rabbi Yehuda didn't answer. And the Talmud thought that the Rebbe didn't understand, didn't hear, So he repeated the question word for word. Says the Gemara, Hadar Amar, Hadar Amar Le, Achronim Mechlal Dika Rishonim Maihi. What he asks the same question again. So Rabbi Yehuda barks back and says, Amar Le, my daitach, what is it that you're thinking? You think that it's someone who doesn't know the answer to this question isn't the great person? Are you just digging to try to get me to be, stump the rabbi? What are you doing? Why are you even asking this? You already just asked me. Why are you asking again? Okay, so he picked up on the clue. So we see over here that he actually did do the self-imposed day of excommunication. And says the Gemara, he does make a good point. So he says, what in fact was the first? It was a great question. Rabbi Yehuda never answered it because he was annoyed. But what is the answer to the question? Says the Gemara, the answer is, Vaydaber David LaHashem as divrei hashira hazos bayom hitzel Hashem oso mikaf kol oev mikaf Shaul. That when David was finally saved mikaf Shaul, so then David sang a shira. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu David. This was his first nevuah. Kadosh Baruch Hu says to David, shira ata omer al malpalaso shel Shaul. How could you possibly sing when Shaul is now no longer there to kill you? Ilmale ata Shaul v'hu David. Had you switched places, the Rishonim here say it's not just that. It's if they lived under different mazalos. That's what Rashi says. Rashi says 5 lines down, Nata Shaul shenolad b'mazalo, v'hu David shenolad b'mazal shalcha. If that's true, back in the Gemara, ibadati kama David mipanav, a lot of Davids would have been killed. Had David's mazel been Shaul's and vice versa, a lot of Davids would have been killed. Hainu dichsiv. That's why the pasuk says that David regretted his shira. Shikayon leDavid asher shar laHashem al divrei Kush ben Yemini. He refers to David. He refers to Shaul as Kush. Kush Shemo v'halu Shaul Shemo. Shaul's name is Shaul, not Kush. Elama Kushi mishune be'oro. Just like the Kushi people had a darker skin, and that just like that was a difference for them. Af Shaul mishune b'maisav. Even Shaul, he was different in his ways, and Rashi here highlights that he was a tzaddik gamor. And then Kayotze Ata Badavar Atomer, we have this similar idea where Kush was used as a model, as a homily, as a mashal for something that was actually quite good. Alodos Haisha Hakushis Asher Lokach, a reference to Tzipora. The Kushis Shema, but her name was not Kushis. Alot Tzipora Shema, her name was Tzipora. Elamak Kushis Meshuna Be'orav, Tzipora Meshuna B'Maaseh, that she was a tzaddikas gemur as well, super modest person. And we use the mashal of Kushis, that just like these people are very different because of their skin, so too this person is very different for her own reason, and that she's a tzaddikas. And similarly, yet again, the word kush is used again. Kayotze b'davar ata omer vayishma eved melech hakushi. But that Kushi was Tzidkiyahu. Kushi Shmo v'alud Tzidkiya Shmo. Elama Kushi Mishuna be'oro. Just like people with colored skin have a difference to them in the color of their skin. Have Tzidkiya Mishuna b'maisav. So it's just very interesting. Our modern culture, we flipped everything around so negatively. The Gemara refers positively. It's being used as a positive mashal for tzaddik, just a different color of skin. It's not used in a negative way at all. Okay, fine. That's what the Gemara says. One more example of this. Okay, it's
probably in that day they weren't dangerous.
No, we're not doing that. Okay, there's probably fewer people of different colored skins because of the evolutions of the world, but we're not going there. Now I have to edit my videos for the first time. Yeah, it's time. Kayotze badavar ata omer, 752 block. Kayotze badavar, I have to see how loud it came out. I may just kind of drop the volume a little bit. Kayotze badavar ata omer halo kipnei kushim atem li beis Yisrael, a reference to the Jews as kushim. Kushim Shimon, v'lo Yisrael Shimon, the Jews are referred to as Yisrael. Just like those with colored skin, they just have a difference in their skin. The Jews have different behaviors. Heard a beautiful shiur many years ago. The Jews are supposed to be maladapted. We always dress a little differently. We always talk a little differently. We don't physically interact with the opposite gender. There's so many differences. Our kashas, I can sit in the restaurant and just give me a Coke, just give me a water. There's so many things that we do. We're supposed to be maladapted in some degree. We're not supposed to be perfectly enmeshed in society. Fine. Amar Reb Shmuel, Amar Rab Nachmeni, Amar Rav Yonasan. My dichsiv, what does the pasuk mean when it says Neum David ben Yishai Neum Gever Hukam Ol? So the Gemara says in the words Hukam Ol about David, Neum David ben Yishai Shehekim Ola Shel Tshuva. He showed the power of Tshuva after the Ma'aseh of Bathsheba. Amar Elokei Yisrael Li Davar Tzur Yisrael Moshe Ba'adam Tzadik Moshe Liras Elokim Ma'ika Amar. What's shot in the pasuk? Amar Rabbi Abba Hachi Kamar. Here's what the pasuk means. Amar Elokei Yisrael Li, Hashem said to me, Dvar tzur olamim ani moshel ba'adam. I'm the one who's in charge of man. Mi moshel bi. Who rules over Hashem? Says the Gemara, a tzaddik. Shani gozer. Ani gozer gzer mavatla. That a tzaddik is able to uproot that which I am gozer. Very powerful idea. Similarly, Eilesh Mos HaGiburim Asher LeDavid Yoshev. So this pasuk has a lot of names. I have to read the rest of the pasuk to make it valuable, that there were a lot of names of people who were Giborim, and the pasuk reads, Bashebes was one name, Tachkemoni was one name, Rosh HaShalishi, who was another name, Adino HaEtzni, V'chule. So let's see what the Gemara means by all of these names. Says the Gemara, Maika Amar, what's pshat with all of these names of the Giborim of David? They're not normal names. Amar Rabbi Bo Hachikam. This is what's up shot in the pasuk. These are the characteristics of strengths of David. Yoshev Basheves, what does that mean? B'shasha Yoshev B'yeshiva, when he was in yeshiva, Lo haya Yoshev al gabe kar muksasos ela al gabe karka. That when he was in yeshiva, he never sat on a pillowed chair or anything else. He sat on the ground. D'cholkama dahava Rabbi, when his Rebbe was alive, his Rebbe's name was Ira Hayi Iri. Kayam, whenever he was alive, so that the Rebbe have a masne luhul rabban al gabe kar muksasos. The Rebbe would sit on pillows and blankets to be comfortable. Kinach nafshe, when he died, it was then anticipated that David would take over and have a masne David the rabban, and he was then teaching in yeshiva. But still, have a Yosef al gabe karka, he wouldn't get off the ground. Amrulay, they said to him, "You're the Rebbe. Leisev mara kar muksasos. You should sit on the pillows and sit on the comfortable. Says on something comfortable. Says more lo kabi lalei. So that's one of the things where he was praised. One of the character strengths was Yoshev b'Sheves. He was very happy with his seat sitting on the ground. What's tachkemoni? So what is that language of strength of David? Amar Rav, Amar lo Kadosh Baruch Hu, v'hishpalta atzmecha, because you lowered yourself to hate kemoni. That's what it means. Techakemoni, to hate kemoni. Be like me. Shani gozer gzera about tamavadla. You can be somewhat godlike in that I can put out a gezerah and you can undo it. What does it mean? Rosh hashlishi te rosh l'shloshes avos. You're going to be the crown jewel. You're going to be the one who's the leader of the three avos. Hu adino ha'etzni. What does that mean? Kshaya yoshe ba'osek b'torah. When he was actually sitting and learning haya me'adin atzmo ketolas. He would roll over like a worm would. He would fold himself over, kafuf, totally bent over. But when he had to stand up in battle, he would make himself as strong as a tree, standing up tall and proud. Lastly, 4 lines from the bottom, the pasuk continues, the same pasuk, what is this reference to David, his strength of all of killing 800 people at once? That is an archer. David HaMelech would fire off one arrow and kill 800 people. And you know what? It bothered him. Why didn't I get the extra 200 to get to 1,000? Why did he think that? How can one chase 1,000? So he knows that it's possible that one can chase 1,000. Why didn't he get the 1,000? Why did he only merit to get 800? I'm going to limit your capacity in killing here as a soldier. A tzaddik should be able to kill 1,000. You are a tzaddik gomer, but I had to pull back a little bit of your koach because of what you did with Uriah. Famously with Uriah, Bathsheba was married to Uriah, and he put Uriah in the front lines, and he ended up being killed. And then the retroactive get that was set out. Okay, the whole long story. We'll speak about it another time. We're going to stop right here. 2 lines from the bottom. We'll pick up tomorrow morning at 7:10 with Daf Yomi. Wishing you all a beautiful night.